7 mental loops avoidance gets stuck in during no contact. When no contact begins, most people assume the avoidant feels relief, space, freedom, silence, finally no pressure. But what actually happens beneath that calm exterior is far more complex and mentally exhausting. Avoidants don't process separation the way anxious or emotionally expressive people do. Instead of moving through emotions directly, they get trapped in invisible mental loops that repeat quietly in the background. These loops don't look like heartbreak on the surface, but internally they create confusion, delayed grief, and a constant low-level tension that doesn't resolve easily. No contact doesn't immediately heal the avoidant. It forces them to confront patterns they've spent a lifetime avoiding, and that's where these 7 mental loops begin to take over. The first mental loop is relief, followed by unease. At the beginning of no contact, the avoidant genuinely feels lighter, calmer, and even convinced that the separation proves they were right all along. The absence of emotional demands gives their nervous system a break, and for a moment, everything feels manageable again. But relief doesn't last, because once the stimulation quiets down, something unfamiliar creeps in: unease. Without the relationship acting as a distraction, they begin noticing a strange emptiness, not dramatic sadness, but a dull sense of something missing that they can't quite name. Their mind oscillates between, "I needed this space," and "why does this feel so uncomfortable if this was the right decision?" Creating a loop where relief and discomfort continuously replace each other without resolution. The second mental loop is, "I miss them, but I don't want closeness." This is one of the most confusing internal battles for avoidance, because missing someone doesn't automatically translate into wanting intimacy. During no contact, memories start surfacing: specific moments, small gestures, familiar energy, and the avoidant feels an unexpected pull toward the person they pushed away. But the moment that longing grows too close to emotional vulnerability, their defensive system activates. They begin mentally listing reasons the relationship wouldn't work, reminding themselves of perceived flaws, or reframing the connection as too much. This loop keeps them stuck between nostalgia and self-protection, longing and withdrawal, desire and resistance, never fully allowing either side to win. The third mental loop is, "If I reach out, I lose control." Avoidants associate emotional exposure with loss of autonomy, so during no contact, the idea of reaching out feels dangerous, not because they don't care, but because it threatens their sense of control. Their mind runs endless simulations. What if the conversation pulls them back into emotional responsibility, expectations, or dependency? Even when they want to reconnect, the fear of being emotionally entangled again stops them. This creates paralysis, where they think about reaching out repeatedly, sometimes even typing messages they never send, reinforcing the loop that silence equals safety, even when silence is slowly eating away at them. The fourth mental loop is, "They're probably fine without me." Instead of expressing vulnerability, avoidants often cope by minimizing their emotional significance in other people's lives. During no contact, they imagine you moving on easily, thriving without them, replacing them without effort. This belief protects them from rejection, because if you never needed them, then losing you doesn't hurt as much. But this loop backfires because it also triggers an internal identity wound. If they weren't truly important, what does that say about their ability to connect? They bounce between detachment and quiet insecurity, convincing themselves you're fine while secretly wondering why that thought hurts more than expected. The fifth mental loop is, "I'll deal with this later." Avoidants are masters of emotional postponement, and no contact intensifies this pattern. Instead of processing loss, they distract themselves: work, routines, entertainment, new interests, telling themselves they'll reflect on the relationship when life slows down. But emotions don't disappear when ignored. They wait. Weeks or even months later, something small triggers the unresolved feelings, and suddenly the avoidant feels a delayed wave of sadness, confusion, or longing they didn't expect. This loop keeps them emotionally stuck in the past while believing they've already moved on, creating a disconnection between their conscious narrative and their internal reality. The sixth mental loop is, "What if I made a mistake?" This loop doesn't appear immediately. It emerges after enough time has passed for the avoidant to feel safe enough to reflect. When the pressure of the relationship is gone and no one is asking anything of them, clarity slowly begins to surface. They start re-examining moments where they pulled away, shut down, or dismissed emotional needs. And for the first time, they question whether the problem was the relationship or their avoidance of intimacy. But this realization feels threatening, because acknowledging it would mean confronting deep-rooted patterns they've relied on for survival. So the mind circles endlessly around the question without landing anywhere solid. The seventh and final mental loop is, I want connection, but only at a distance. This is where many avoidants remain stuck the longest. During no contact, they fantasize about reconnecting in a way that feels safe. No pressure, no expectations, no emotional demands. But real relationships don't exist in theory, they exist in reality. The avoidant wants the warmth, familiarity, and validation of connection without the vulnerability that comes with it. And that contradiction keeps them frozen. They may watch from afar, check updates, think about you late at night, but never move toward true intimacy. This loop sustains emotional attachment without resolution, keeping both connection and closure just out of reach. What's important to understand is that these mental loops are not signs of indifference. They're signs of internal conflict. Avoidants don't process loss loudly. They process it slowly, quietly, and often much later than expected. No contact doesn't punish them. It removes distractions and exposes patterns they've been running from for years. And while you may never witness their internal struggle, it exists whether they acknowledge it or not. But here's the most important truth. Your healing does not depend on whether they break out of these loops. The moment you stop trying to understand their silence and start honoring your own emotional clarity, you step out of the cycle entirely. And that's where real peace begins. And if you're watching this hoping that no contact will somehow wake them up, make them realize what they lost, or finally push them to change, I want you to pause for a moment and breathe. Because the real shift doesn't happen on their side first. It happens on yours. No contact isn't a strategy to control an avoidance emotions. It's a boundary that protects your nervous system, your self-respect, and your ability to think clearly again. Whether they stay stuck in those mental loops or eventually break free from them is something you cannot manage, predict, or force. And the sooner you release that responsibility, the lighter you'll feel. What matters now is not whether they miss you, regret the distance, or replay the relationship in their mind, but whether you're finally stepping out of the emotional pattern that kept you waiting, hoping, and overanalyzing in the first place. When you stop measuring your worth by their silence or their confusion, you reclaim something far more valuable than closure. You reclaim your emotional dignity. And from that place, you begin to attract relationships that don't require you to disappear, chase, or shrink just to feel chosen.